Hey everybody, welcome back to JNJtabletop. A while ago, I did a video on Avatar The Last Airbender and how you could pull inspiration from that and use it in your 5e games. Recently, Jake and I were watching itsevbo play some of the Soulsborne games, and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. I wonder if we could get Evan on here to talk about how to use information from Dark Souls and enhance your games with it. So that's what we're going to do.
Hello, and welcome back to this J&J Tabletop video. My name is Jake, and with me as always is my good friend Josh. And as he mentioned, we are joined by our friend Evan, who's helping us with this Soulsborne D&D marriage, or marriage, if you will. By the way, this overlay here, we're kind of getting in the spirit of things. You can check it out as the Gothic Castle overlay on ttrpgoverlay.com. But Evan, if someone doesn't know what Soulsborne things and stuff is, how would you describe that to them?
Soulsborne games are developed by FromSoft, a pretty big developer now. They just came out with Elden Ring. I'm sure you've heard of that by now. But these games are generally characterized by extreme difficulty that you overcome through perseverance, and generally a pretty gothic aesthetic and lore that is, for some reason, hidden pretty deep in things like item descriptions and obscure NPC conversations and things like that.
Kind of like Destiny.
Download the app today.
Yes. Whether you wanted to or not, you stepped into another pun from J&J Tabletop. But that sounds like a very, very story-rich environment that you could tell really intriguing stories. And I agree with Josh when he pitched the idea. I got excited. I guess let's start at the beginning. If you're the dungeon master, Evan, how would you set the tone? It feels like you got to grab the attention and just bam, hit him with something hard.
The games actually do this in the exact same way that I would recommend for the table as well. For Dark Souls 3 in particular, it starts with a really good opening monologue, which comes with also an incredible cinematic. I definitely recommend at least trying the game out or checking it out on YouTube. But the opening monologue goes a little something like this. Yes, indeed. It is called Lothric, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades, and the lords go without thrones. When the link of fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old lords of Cinder from their graves. Aldrich, saint of the deep. Farron's undead legion, the Abyss Watchers, and the reclusive lord of the profaned capital, Yorm the Giant. Only, in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones, and the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder, and so it is that ash seeketh embers. That monologue gives you pretty much everything that you need to know about this world right out the gate. I'm going to dive into that just for a second to kind of go through what we've learned from that opening monologue. This is the kind of monologue, by the way, that as a DM, you love to see. You start, reading this text off and you immediately see your players start writing things down. I love that. It's the best.
That intensity grips the table. Yeah.
You get just the right music playing behind it, to get the mood going.
Especially when you deliver it like that. Like, can I just give a quick shout out? He does voice acting, and he is available. So check out at itsevbo, because I think he has all that stuff on his Twitter. So just check him out. He does obviously a really good job.
So through that opening monologue, we now know that we're in a world called Lothric. We know that there are some people called the Lords of Cinder, and their lands all converge in Lothric. So it's sort of a central location. We know that the fire fades. We're not entirely sure what that means yet, but we can kind of infer what that might mean as we go on. We know that there are these Lords of Cinder that are involved with the fire in some way, and that they're planning to abandon their thrones. They're not where they're supposed to be, and it is your job as the unkindled to find embers. So we know that fire is really important. We know that the fire is fading, and we know that these people who are supposed to be in charge of fire are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you need to find them.
I I really love the way that they did that. And I love how it's just maybe minute long speech. It gives you everything you need to know and nothing you don't. And it doesn't explain anything. It's just like, here's some information, here's some main points, figure it out. Obviously, like from playing the game, you know that you have to explore the world and all that kind of stuff to learn more information. But the only way to get more information, get more lore, and to find out what's going on is you have to explore the world. You have to talk to NPCs, and all of that is going to give you more context for everything that's going on. The nice thing about that, too, is if you don't really know what's going on and talking to NPCs is your only way to find out what's going on, it's going to be kind of skewed information. I love stories that are told from the perspective of an unreliable narrator. It's a lot of fun to just not know what's true and what's not true from who you're being told this story from. So the fact that the way the world builds itself and the way that you're learning about the quests and the lore and all of that stuff is from NPCs. You know, it's not from a narrator, it's not from knowledge that your character knows. It's like, here's the basics. If you want to find out more, you're going to be talking to someone who might be a crazy person. They might be involved in some sort of cult or whatever that makes them believe like this is the specific way, and this person is all powerful and so good because praise the light, you know, and all of these things. And I just love the fact that there's really no way to know what is 100% true and what's not. And as you talk to more NPCs and figure out what's going on, you kind of just have to piece it together for yourself, and that's a lot of fun. And I think that's an example of what like soft world building, where it's just you learn about the world through the world. Nothing is expressly told to you.
I really like that statement too, because even though it sets the tone and it tells you stuff that's important, but really, like you said, you don't know much about it, but you still have direction. You have a task to attend to accomplish all of that in a large box text is really good. So we're talking about a dark and oppressed world here in Soulsborne. What about your job as a dungeon master to set the tone? Like, what kinds of things can you do to really lean into that?
For Dark Souls in particular, it's a world that's heavily influenced by the gods. It's the gods have decided to kind of step away from a world that wants to die. In a way, it's a world that's already dead, but isn't allowed the release of death. So all of these humans that you come across, these places are completely, it's as though nobody lives there anymore. It's completely torn apart because all of the people are not allowed to be released from life. You can kind of create these environments and these moods that would be affected by that sort of cataclysm, that darkness, that heaviness that comes with not being allowed to have the release of death. You know, the big downside to immortality is that you stick around way long after everything else does. So imagine being in that for such a long time. And I think it all starts to kind of unlock that part of your brain that lets you build that world. So looking through things through the lens of the darker side of immortality is a great place to start.
I love that concept tremendously. And there's a lot of stuff out there already that could kind of mirror some things like that. Like if you're familiar with the Wildmount setting, you could look at something like the Calamity, for example, that really altered the foundation of how the gods and the people can interact with each other, which is obviously a very core thing.
I think that's a perfect comparison, right? What if Wildmount didn't bounce back from the Calamity? The interesting thing with the Calamity is that like the details of it are kind of lost to time, and there's some people that know some things, and there's everybody who has opinions about those kind of things, but they know how it affected them, and they know that life will never be the same because of the Calamity, regardless of whether it's Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, whatever. It is like a world that has been hit with the Calamity, and then the Divine Gate never happened. They never bounced back. And that's wild.
I really like the way that the story was being told, like in our Ancient Relics and Hooky Religions. Right in the beginning, you had us enter into an old temple that had the story of Exandria in art form on the walls, and you got to kind of introduce the viewer to that. I mean, I know some of us may have been familiar with some things, but you also got to give your own twist on it, which dungeon masters out there, I highly recommend putting your spin and your twist on things. It makes experienced players question what they know, and that's always a good thing. But what it also does is you as a player, you're looking at something that's historical and you're not getting the information directly from the source. It is somebody else's perspective telling it to you through the lens of some kind of history, but also there's just like there's this time disconnect. You don't know if you have the entire picture. And when there's that kind of ignorance or that kind of incomplete information, oppression happens. That's when you're trying to fight something, but you're not even 100% sure what it is you're fighting.
And the people who live in a world like that, those are going to be some really interesting people. I'm going to push it back to you, Evan, but I'm not going to try to explain this because I think you could do it better than I can. What kind of NPCs and what kind of people do you meet in a place like Lothrin?
Lothric is the world that Dark Souls 3 takes place in, or land it takes place in, I should say. Like you just mentioned, the people that would make it through these kinds of events would be there for a reason. The people who are more timid are probably there because they were being protected by somebody. And maybe that person that was protecting them is gone and they're trying to survive on their own. What is it about them that makes them able to survive? Or are they? Maybe you save that person and, find a way to take them somewhere like a small settlement that there might be some, a few people with their minds intact. Maybe they are a warrior who has become crestfallen. They were fighting for a certain cause and then realizing that the state that the world is in, the causes don't really matter anymore. You don't really need to fight for a thing. You just need to fight to survive. And they've completely lost faith in what it was they were fighting for. Maybe they're just a thief. Their big thing was they would just go and steal from nobles and give it to people who they thought were more deserving of the wealth. But now they use those skills to help out a small settlement of people that they found themselves a part of. So they'll sneak into those destroyed cities and castles and steal any supplies that they can to bring them back. Maybe that's something they need help with. A quest that your party can undertake is helping this guy go on a supply raid, and maybe he ends up in over his head. These people are all here because they either have the skill to be there or they've been shown kindness by people who have the skills to be there. And maybe they're worthy of that kindness. And maybe there's people that are faking that kindness in order to get themselves somewhere that they would like to be, or get themselves in a nice cushy position that once they're found out, they can either skip town or take care of things another way. Everyone's kind of out for themselves at a certain point. It's just who has hit that and who hasn't. So there's all kinds of folks that you'll run into out there. Because the world is dying or dead or not able to die, closure is a thing that doesn't really exist anymore. You don't have that release of death. A lot of what will satisfy people that are living in a place like that is closure. So a lot of them are desperate for, maybe they've lost connection with a loved one, and you find a piece, a garment of theirs, and it turns out they were completely destroyed in some way, and you found something of theirs to confirm that they're no longer around. That's a form of closure for that person, and you've given them an answer. You've closed a chapter of their life that wasn't allowed to be closed. That's something that they thirst for, and that's it. It brings up the idea of what is the most valuable thing in a world where closure doesn't exist, and closure is pretty high up there.
That's heavy. That's really heavy stuff. And it makes for the kinds of decisions and player agency that so many players try to find the right solution. It's like, well, what do you choose? Like, it is what it is. Is this the kind of decision that has lasting consequences? Or when the stakes and setting is extreme, you're going to have a lot of extreme beliefs, and you're going to have a lot of extreme choices to make. You're going to have a lot of gods and NPCs and zealots that are out there that are going to push the envelope with these kinds of decisions and these kinds of situations that really nobody wins. It's just, it feels empty and broken with despair. I love how that just sets the tone and the stakes like really high, especially when there's no like quote unquote right answer to a choice. Like maybe the end of all things, maybe he's in the player's hands, but maybe the end of all things is a good thing. I don't know. Maybe it's up to them to figure it out.
On the subject of NPCs, some of the NPCs are the actual like gods of this world, and they could be pretty gonzo pretty unfriendly. But something that's really interesting to me is that they're all approachable. And maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are approachable. And even back to the beginning of this video, right? We learned that in that opening crawl or whatever you want to call it, these gods exist in this world. You could find them, you could meet them, and in most cases, correct me if I'm wrong, you could kill them. Pretty wild decisions that I'm sure have some big consequences, right? You mentioned something to us about the flame and just kind of the concept of the game. Do you mind just like getting into that like in a little bit more detail? And I'm just gonna say probably spoiler warning for all the people out there. All these games have been out for quite some time, but just so you know.
The opening crawl, who is narrated to you by someone unknown, although I think it's speculated that it's somebody that you meet pretty much right in the beginning of the game. The implication of it is that the fire is kind of the soul of the world. It's the thing that's keeping the world alive, and it was something that the gods were able to harness, and through harnessing it and forcing the fire to continue burning, it grants a curse on the human race. It does not allow them to die properly. Basically, they die, they come back, they die, they come back. And every time that happens, they lose a little piece of themselves. Spoiler warning again for the game. But as things progress, you're basically told that it is your position as the unkindled to reclaim pieces of the flame from the Lords of Cinder and bring all those pieces together, access the flame itself, the first flame as it is known, and rekindle it using your powerful soul, your spirit that you have built and strengthened by doing what you needed to do to get there. And in doing that, you refire the cycle. Now all the gods are back alive, and all of the humans are unable to die, and everything is going to just keep, withering away the way that it is. Or if you do the right number of optional things, you meet the right people, you talk to the right people, you find the right things, suddenly there's another option. What if the fire doesn't get rekindled? What if we just kill the thing that's guarding it and snuff it out? What happens then? Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we let the fire die and the world just ends. Something very interesting happens when you do this. And that is that you believe that the world ends and you've done a very good thing. And there is a single line of dialogue as the screen fades to black, where the person who stands with you asks if you can still hear them. And that's fantastic because that one line being added in there adds the idea of, wait, so is the world dead, or is fire not what we thought it was? Maybe fire is just the god's influence and the world can continue without fire. We don't actually need it. These are the kinds of things that you can build into your world. You're introduced to, this is how the world is. But who says that the person telling you that actually knows that? It's like we said before, the unreliable narrator. How is anyone supposed to know? So you make your choices, you do your things, and then maybe you find out it's not exactly what you thought it was. And that could be a really good thing or a really bad thing. In Dark Souls, I would say it's potentially a good thing, because maybe it means, the curse is lifted, people can die, but they can still live out their lives the way they see fit. And that's it. They can continue on. Maybe invent electricity so there's some light, because otherwise it's very, very dark right now. Yes, the idea of understanding the world as it is and then learning through experience what it actually is a really cool thing to build into a game like this, especially when those players are making those heavy choices and building their plan and coming through and doing it, and maybe they're validated and maybe now they understand how it really is, and it's very exciting. It could be really rewarding for the players and for yourself as the DM.
So many layers to that. It's such an incredible concept that the narrator, which in this case probably a servant of said gods, right? Keep the light burning, add to the light, fix it, rekindle the flame. But of course they would tell you that, because that's exactly what they want. How do you know if that's the correct thing to do. I love the idea that the world is so broken because they're trying to hold on to something like creatures or whatever that are supposed to be larger than life and supposed to be like all powerful or whatever in a lot of these worlds and stories, that there's just something so human about trying to hold on to that and trying to keep something going that is just dead and done and destroyed, and all of the suffering that you're causing yourself and other people or whatever from doing that. And I love that human aspect.
You're just going to try and take some concepts and not the exact things. Lean into why. Each NPC, and sometimes the gods are NPCs in this situation too, lean into their why. Why do they want to keep it going? That's always going to be the driving force behind it.
It makes for a really interesting world when something like the fire continuing because the gods are being selfish, but meanwhile they're lording themselves over the humans, as these higher beings. It's eye-opening to see that they're just people, but they have this power that they can lean on. Getting to see that injustice get another layer deeper, it can really light a fire in your players' bellies.
So last but not least, I just want to talk about a few resources that already exist in 5e. I think a lot of tables don't use them. There's stuff in chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. We're going to have some links in the description, so go ahead and check that out. And while you're there, make sure you go to Evan's Twitch, Evan's Twitter, check out our link tree, and say hello, follow Discord, all those kinds of things. But there's things like lingering injuries. I feel like lingering injuries could be something that leans into just how desperate. Maybe when one of these creatures comes back, one of these people comes back, there's just some physical limitation they have. I don't know. This is your game. You can make it some interesting way. There's lists of diseases in there. There's madness. You can use all of those tables to inspire your own version of what kind of weird lasting consequences you want to put in your game for your players to have to navigate. And even if you're interested in things like the Critical Role resurrection rules, where it's not guaranteed that they come back and the DC keeps going up every time, like there's lots of ways that you could take just a few simple ideas to try and represent some of the core elements here. And if you're interested in learning about, say, like the avatar video that Josh had mentioned in the beginning of this video, you could probably click on it right now. It's over here. And while you're at it, say hello to our little friends. I don't know why I said that, but our little friends are in the comment section, and you should say hello to each other. So do that. How you said little friends and Evan immediately looked down.
I was looking down at the comments. They're down there.
Yeah.
Oh, let me see that one. Oh, you can't say that. You're going to get banned for sure.